Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video, doing the historic video for the infamous summer of 2007. Now, I've had some pretty poor summers in the last few years, but I think 2007 really does go down as the dregs of summers in the last few years. In fact, in my lifetime, probably any of our lifetimes, actually, anybody watching this video can probably not remember a summer as appalling as 2007. I'm sure you remember it well. Phenomenal rainfall through May, June and July, and really severe flooding in some parts of the country as well. And this summer really marks the start of the decline into the current sort of much colder climate that we're in. Through the 1990s and the first half of the 2000s, we had pretty warm climate, lots of hot summers, particularly in the 1990s, and generally years with above average returns in terms of the yearly temperatures. But the summer of 2007 really marks the turning point, I think, and this is more apparent now looking back at it, that the summer of 2007 really marks a turning point in terms of the warm-up that we had from around 1988 onwards through the 1990s into the early 2000s, and then the decline that's taken place really since this summer 2007, gradually accelerating through the latter part of the last decade, and then of course culminating so far in the severely cold December 2010 and the severely cold March that we just experienced 2013. This summer 2007, I think, really does mark the turning point and the beginning of the end of the dramatic and very consistent warm spell that we had through the 1990s and the early 2000s. Anyway, before I get on with it, I just want to mention the advertising. There's a video ad sitting just above this weather video at gazweatherbiz.com. It's there on all my pages. Please play the video ad. You'll be supporting gazweatherbiz.com by doing that. You can share it on Facebook and Twitter and click through to the advertiser's website. And thank you very much for doing that. There's a couple of websites that really help with this video. The charts are coming from the Historic Archive at weathercentral.de, and you can find Weather Central on my links page. Go through to it, have a look at the Historic Archive. They've got an archive of charts which you believe going all the way back to January the 1st, 1871. So an incredibly long archive of really interesting charts. You can while away many a happy bank holiday Monday, as I have done myself at the Historic Archive at Weather Central. Also want to mention Trevor Harley's personal website. Got loads of information there. Again, you can find Trevor Harley's website on my links page. Click through from the links page to Trevor Harley's website. A phenomenal amount of information there, indexed by months and years. In some instances, he's got some information on weather events going right the way back to the Dark Ages, right way back to medieval times, beyond that into the Dark Ages, 1000s, 900s. Some really incredible information, incredible resource of information is Trevor Harley's website. Wonderful website. Both those websites are wonderful. Do check them out if you get the chance. So we're going to start the story of 2007 on the 1st of April 2007. Just to put things in context, we'd had a very mild winter. It's been the mildest winter actually since, I think I'm right in saying, 1869. So it had been a really mild winter, and the warm sort of weather continued into the April of 2007. Actually, April 2007 was the warmest on the Central England temperature record, going right way back to 1659, and it beat the previous record, which was 1865, by over 1 degree. So it was an exceptional month, April 2007, and very high pressure dominating. So this chart from the 1st of April 2007 really typifying the month, high pressure dominating there. And as we move through the charts, but high pressure does continue to sit around the country. You nearly get a cold spell on the 5th. We got this trough dropping into Scandinavia, but the high pressure just held it at bay. And as we go through into the 8th, we see the high pressure still in control. The cold air associated with that trough is up over Scandinavia, but the high pressure was really holding sway through into the 8th. And then things really start warming up as we go into the middle of the month. The temperatures really start picking up. Here we are on the 12th, the high pressure becoming more situated to the east of the country, but all areas very, very dry. I only recorded 2 millimetres of rain through this month, April 2007. It remains my driest month that I've ever recorded from the 1st of January 1993. That's where my records go back to. It remains the driest month I've ever recorded with just 2 millimetres of rain. But as we go through to the middle of the month, temperatures really do start picking up, and as we go through to the 14th, 15th, we see temperatures rising up, shooting up here, going up into the mid-20s on the 15th of April. 26 degrees, 80 Fahrenheit, or just under 80 Fahrenheit, was recorded at Hertsmanzow in East Sussex, and that was the highest temperature that we had for the year until August. I think I'm right in saying that we didn't beat this temperature that we had on the 15th of April until we got to August. That just shows you how dreadful the rest of the summer months were. Here's the upper air temperatures for the 15th of April 2007. Very, very warm. Yeah, with that high pressure. Notice the cold air up to the north. That's where the jet stream is. The jet stream is up to the north, but it wasn't going to stay there. It's going to move south as we go through into May. But the high pressure still continues to dominate as we go through in towards the 18th of April 2007. Very much in control of the pattern here, keeping it dry. A little bit cooler as we get through beyond that mid-month period. The temperatures do start to drop down a little bit, but still very warm, really, for the time of the year. Still very warm for April. I think I say it was the warmest April on record, and we didn't see these kind of temperatures we had in the middle of the month period till we got on into August. As we go through to the 21st, high pressure still dominating, low pressure trying to come in off the Atlantic, but really being held at bay. And that low pressure gets a little bit stronger as we go through to the 25th of April. Maybe starting to break down the high pressure, does it? Well, no, the high pressure builds back stronger than ever as we go through to the end of the month. So it was an incredibly dry April. A lot of places getting no rain until the final week, and then even when it did rain in the final week, it was very much in the north and west. Driest April since 1957 in many places, and the warmest April on the Central England temperature. Although we did better this actually in April 2011. I didn't think we'd ever better to April 2007, but we did, and again that happened in the year of 2007. But as we go through into May, well, now things are going to start changing. High pressure is still dominating the weather on the 1st of May, still keeping it dry, warm and sunny. But this prolonged spell of dry weather, this spring drought, really was coming to its end. It's coming to its conclusion. As we go through to the 5th of May, and then into the 7th of May, we find the high pressure finally starting to break down, low pressure beginning to come through. This is May Day, Bank Holiday Monday, the 7th of May. Wasn't particularly wet away from the north. Many areas in the south still dry at this point, but as I say, this was really the beginning of the end for the prolonged spring drought. As we get through in towards the 9th, well, then things are starting to turn and settle across all parts of the country. The high pressure is finally breaking down to the south. Low pressure is starting to come in off the Atlantic, and then as we go through to the 10th, well, yes, this gives many of us our first prolonged rain, probably since the early March or the end of February of 2007. So by the time you get through to this period, 8th, 9th, 10th, yes, we are seeing rain breaking through across many parts of the country, and then that sets us up for quite an unsettled mid-month period with low pressure really dominating the weather. And notice what's happening here. This low pressure is just starting to dive south here, going down in towards the Bay of Biscay and northern Portugal. This is kind of the start of what's going on in this month, and particularly through the summer as well. This is kind of interesting, because this low pressure is now starting to dive down from Iceland. It's beginning to push southwards in toward the Bay of Biscay in that direction, and this is something that's very unique to the summer of 2007, and is very much, or has very much been the case in many recent summers and recent years. This idea that we start to get high pressure blocking up here, starting to block around Greenland, consequently forcing the low pressure, the trough, to dive southwards. This has been an ongoing scenario It starts really in the summer of 2007, but it's been an ongoing scenario for many of the recent years. Now, as we go through in towards the 14th, well, that low pressure really dominated the weather over the top of the country. Very wet spell through the middle of the month, but then things start to dry up a little bit as we go into the the second half of the month, I should say, and then we'll get very wet in the latter stages of May. But through the second half of May, things do dry up. The Azores High tries to ridge back in, tries desperately, and actually it brings some fairly dry and settled weather to England and Wales, but it's still quite unsettled up in the north. Here we are on the 24th then, with the high pressure really ridging into the south, and this is taking us towards the late spring bank holiday weekend, when things really do start to develop and the summer starts to show its hand, really, the summer pattern. As we go through to the 25th and the 26th, notice the high pressure is pulling out into the Atlantic. These areas of low pressure developing to the north of the country on the 26th of May. This is Saturday, the 26th of May. Pretty cool day this was. Temperatures just into the mid-teens. There was some rain up in the north, but it turns a good deal wetter as we go through to the 27th. And again, it's this idea that the low pressure is beginning to dive southwards from the north. It's beginning to push southwards. The trough is setting up around this area here, and we've got the ridging starting to take place up here. The high pressure is up there, starting to push down this northerly wind. Now, this area of low pressure on Sunday, the 27th of May, gave some really wet conditions. It's a very wet day with 20-30 millimetres of rain quite widely across England and Wales, and that continued then as we go into the bank holiday weekend. I've just gone past it actually. We go into the bank holiday weekend. There we are on the 28th of May. That low pressure is moving to the south of the country, opening the floodgates. This very cold northerly wind. There was more heavy rain. There was a weather front wrapped around this low pressure, giving more heavy rain across England and Wales. I recorded 30 millimetres of rain on this day, so between the 2 days, the 27th and 28th, actually 50 millimetres of rain I recorded. I know many stations across England and Wales recorded similar amounts through this period. 2 inches of rain. Very wet, very cold. One of the coldest late spring bank holidays ever recorded. Temperatures just 7, 8, 9 degrees. Quite wide. The end of that pouring rain on bank holiday Monday morning. Temperatures just 4 or 5 degrees. And actually, 1 or 2 places in the southeast did record little bits of sleet, but it was a really very wet day indeed. Very wet weekend. Horrible bank holiday weekend, and it sets the pattern for the rest of the summer. As we go through to the 31st May, we end May with low pressure still very much dominating, where we've lost the flooding sort of rains, but low pressure still in control. Then as we go into June, we actually start to get an anticyclonic influence. Just briefly, high pressure starts to build up over Scandinavia, giving us quite a nice start to June. Maybe this is a start of low pressure becoming blocked in the Atlantic, and a warm summer pattern beginning to emerge, was it? Well, I think you can guess out as we go through to the 5th of June, where high pressure is dominating there across the country. It was a lovely sort of start to June. Quite a lot of cloud under this high pressure, but generally quite a nice start to June. But as we move through, the high pressure is going to begin to show signs of breaking down as we get through to the 8th. It's all starting to move up towards Iceland and Greenland in terms of those heights. Notice this low pressure beginning to develop here around the Azores, and this is the start of things breaking down as we go through that second week of June. So as we go through to the 10th and then on into the 11th, where the high pressure becoming centred around Iceland and Greenland, never a particularly good sign. The low pressure in the mid-Atlantic waiting to seize its opportunity, and here it comes as we go through to the 12th and then on into the 13th. We've got weather fronts moving in off the Atlantic during this period, giving us very wet weather from the 12th, 13th, 14th. Some really heavy rain starting to push in across the country. I recorded 35 millimetres of persistent and torrential rain on Friday the 14th of June. It was an exceptionally wet day. Many parts of the country recording similar amounts through this period. I say exceptionally wet through this middle month of June. And again, notice once again we've got high pressure up to the north. High pressure is blocking up here, and the low pressure consequently is being forced down as a trough of low pressure with the jet stream coming down here. That's the high pressure showing its hand, blocking to the north, pushing that area of low pressure down across the country. As I say, really wet through this middle month period of June, and even wetter conditions were to come. By now, of course, we've already had the torrential rain through May, more torrential rain going on with this area of low pressure starting coming off the Atlantic on the 18th. Of course, the rivers now are really starting to rise up despite the spring drought. It really is getting pretty critical in many of the river catchments across the country. As we go through into the 21st of June, well, there we are, the high pressure, the low pressure is still dominating across the country. A big trough of low pressure, but high pressure is blocking up to the north. June 2007 was the wettest across many parts of the country, would you believe, since 1967, and we also had tremendous flooding across some parts of the country. Yorkshire, Lincolnshire recording up to 280 millimetres of rain in some places. Now, it was dry for Shetland and Orkney because it's got the high pressure blocking up there, so that kept things dry, but the rest of the country really very, very wet indeed. It's also the dullest June since 1998. As we move through in towards the 23rd, well, low pressure still in situ there over the top of the country, producing more heavy rain. Now we're starting to see serious flooding beginning to develop. The situation through the middle of the month gave flooding through the Midlands, and now it's shifting that flooding more up towards northern England as we go up beyond this in towards the 24th and then on into the 25th. Things are getting really quite critical indeed around the Sheffield area with this area of low pressure. That produced a lot of flooding around the Sheffield area, very serious flooding. The motorway was closed there as it was fear that a dam would actually burst. A very serious situation up there across northern England with that area of low pressure producing in some places, can you believe this, over 145 millimetres of rain falling in just a few hours through this period of the month. So again, exceptionally wet period through into the 24th, 25th of June. Now that low pressure finally starts to move out of the way to the east, opening the floodgates of this northerly wind as we go through to the 26th. Very cold day that was, and then we end June with, yes, you've guessed it, the next area of low pressure beginning to move in off the Atlantic. So this succession of low pressures as we end June 2007 showing no sign of ending. Then as we go through into July 2007, guess what? Low pressure is still dominating, and it's still the same basic sort of pattern. Again, we've got high pressure blocking up here, the low pressure as the trough blocking here, the jet stream being forced southwards by that area of high pressure blocking up to the north of the country. July 2007 was the wettest July since 1936, exceptionally wet month. It was also the coolest month, coolest July since 1993, and you would have to go back to 1988 to find one that was colder than this. So low pressure very much in control on the 1st, still in control into the 3rd, very much dominating weather. Then as we go in towards the end of the first week into the second week, just showing signs that we're trying to reach high pressure up from the Atlantic, but it never really makes it. Low pressure is still dominating. Look at all this blocking that we've got going on up over Greenland and to the north of Scandinavia. But just indications that through this second week of the month we're trying to produce some sort of high pressure to the south, but guess what, it's all going to weaken, and low pressure is down here to the southwest, starting to push up again as we go through middle of the month, 15th, 16th. Very wet conditions across many parts of the country, heavy rain, once again all the blocking still there up to the north of the country. As we go through to the 17th, 18th, and then on the 19th, exceptionally wet day, the 19th of July, I recorded on this day, the 19th of July, 52 millimetres of rain in just that one day, over 2 inches falling in one day. And the reason it's so severe is that we've got a near stationary weather front, we've got a trough of low pressure developing around here, and there's a weather front strung out through that trough, wasn't moving, producing copious amounts of of rain, heavy thunderstorms along that front. As I say, it was near stationary with this developing trough of low pressure over the country. So very violent thunderstorms actually as well on this day. There was embedded thunderstorms along that front. Some really quite spectacular lightning, but it's the rain that's the main thing. Severe flooding once again, and now the flooding is moving down more towards the Midlands, southwestern parts of England. I remember Tewkesbury was very, very badly flooded through this second half of July. Other areas along the River Severn seeing some really serious flooding through this period. So very wet conditions again as we go through in towards the 20th and then on in towards the 22nd. Low pressure is still dominating the weather, producing heavy rain, heavy showers. There's no end to it. It just goes on and on and on through the course of this summer. As we go through to the 25th and then on into the 26th, low pressure is again coming in off the Atlantic, producing more heavy rain. Yes, more heavy rain, and the situation still goes on. We still have the blocking area of high pressure sitting up to the north. We've still got the low pressure here, and we've got the jet stream being forced down across the country by that blocking area of high pressure, pushing the jet stream southwards and forcing these areas of low pressure down with it. So on and on goes the rain. Finally, as we get through to the end of the month, we just start to show signs of ridging in the Azores high very weakly across the country, just beginning to settle things down a little bit for the end of the month. But by now the damage was done. Many areas have experienced flooding. We'd have flooding in the Midlands through the middle of June. We'd had flooding across northern England at the end of June. We'd have more severe flooding down across the southwest through the South Midlands, along the River Severn and parts of Wales as well through the second half of July. Really have been a horrendous summer. Really real severe disruption. Can't emphasise how much disruption there's been. I'm sure you remember it. The poor people that were flooded out through the course of this summer, quite unbelievable. But as we go through to August, things are going to improve a little bit now. High pressure just starting to take over the pattern. But by the way, I should say May, June and July was the wettest on record. You would not find a wetter 3-monthly combination of May, June and July at all. Those records go back to 1766. So yes, the wettest 3-monthly June, July and May, June and July on record. Not for June, July, August, because as we're going to see, high pressure was more dominant through August, but that period, May to July, exceptionally wet. As we go through towards the 4th and the 5th of August, actually high pressure is taking over here and producing quite a warm spell of weather. This was the warmest day of the summer on the 5th of August. The warmest day of the summer, just 30.1, pretty mediocre, but it bettered April anyway. The temperature we had in April, I say the warmest day of 2007. But it didn't last, and let's go through to the 6th. That warmth is breaking down as low pressure takes over. But these areas of low pressure through August are far less violent, really, far less intense. So it was a much drier month. It's wetter in the north, still a bit wetter than average in the north, but for England and Wales, it's actually slightly drier than average, thankfully. But as we go through to the 13th, 14th, 15th, and on towards the 19th, this middle month of the period of the month does get quite a bit of low pressure dominating. So that was the wettest period through the middle of August. When as we go into the latter stages of August, the high pressure again builds in from the Atlantic. So finally through August we get a bit of high pressure. We start to find those river levels beginning to drop at long last. Yes, the high pressure is starting to settle things down. It was a drier than average September as well, so that was helpful. Never particularly warm in this latter stages, through these latter stages of August, because the high pressure is centred more out to the west and the southwest. But yes, it was drier than average month, at least in the south, where we'd had some very severe flooding in July. And in terms of the temperatures, it was the coolest August since 1993, off the back of the very cool and wet months through May, June and July. Now, what caused this exceptional weather pattern with these low pressures constantly diving southwards around that blocking area of high pressure and in situ around the British Isles? Well, there's a couple of theories about what could have caused this. The first theory is the solar activity, which was in the long solar minimum. And if I just highlight 2007 for you, which is just here, the year 2007. Yes, we're in that long solar minimum, which starts in 2002 and doesn't really start picking up until we get through to 2010. We're in the middle then of the long solar minimum. So solar activity is very, very weak. Often weak periods of solar activity appear to coincide with cool weather, block weather, blocking. I've talked about it in the solar video before. But it's a big change from what happened in 2006. 2006 very hot summer, and that was in the solar minimum as well. So you can't put it all down to solar activity. Something else that's very interesting through 2007 is the El Nino. We start 2007, this is the sea surface temperature anomalies, with a very strong El Nino going on, or not a very strong, but quite a moderate sort of El Nino going on through the central and eastern part of the Pacific. All of this warm water here indicating that we do have an El Nino in January. But as we get through to February, look what happens. A very, very quick collapse of the El Nino takes place in February. From the month of January to February, we see temperature anomalies in the central Pacific dropping by something like 3 or 4 degrees from January to February. That's very unusual to see such a rapid collapse of the El Nino. And as we go on beyond this, we're going to see La Nina very quickly developing there as we go into March. So from January to March, in 2 months, we probably see the temperatures dropping something like 5 or 6 degrees here in the central Pacific, and we swing from El Nino in January to La Nina in March. That's very unusual, and that could well have played a big part in this. Certainly at the time, the Met Office was saying this was playing a big part, this cold area of water we have through the central Pacific. Yeah, that's La Nina very quickly developing through the first half of 2007. And when you get these quick collapses in the El Nino, when they quickly collapse and shift to La Nina, then that seems to coincide with some of our worst summers. Now, I'm not saying this was the entire reason, but maybe when you combine the collapse of El Nino to La Nina with the very weak solar activity as well, maybe that gives you the explanation of what caused that exceptional summer of 2007. But what's most interesting to ponder about this is, as I said at the start of the video, this really heralds the decline in the temperatures that we saw beyond this. So 2007 heralds the beginning of the end of the warm-up that we had through the 1990s and early 2000s. It marks the start of the collapse in the Central England temperature that we've seen, shown in the videos before, seen a collapse in the Central England temperature over the last few years. And the summer of 2007 is very pivotal in starting that process off, because whilst the winter of 2007-2008 was still another mild winter because we had that very strong La Nina going on, overall the decline in temperature accelerated through 2008, 2009, 2010, and we started to get those severe winters also begin to coincide with the very poor summers as well. So a very pivotal year in weather history, 2007. It will go down as a phenomenally wet summer. That severe flooding was absolutely appalling. Those poor people flooded, your hearts have to go out to them. But in terms of actual of the bigger picture, 2007 was also very pivotal. That summer was very pivotal in marking the end of the warm spell that we had from the late 80s through the 90s into the early 2000s, and the decline into a much colder climate that we currently find ourselves in. That's it for now. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll be doing more historic videos over the next few weeks and months, I'm quite sure. So if you enjoyed the video, keep checking back to my historic pages. There'll be more historic videos over the next few weeks and months. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.